Princess Alara Kestrel stood before the Asterian High Council, her silver-flecked eyes burning with defiance. The 7 elders of the council gazed down at her from their elevated crystal seats, their elongated features set in expressions of disapproval. "You have disgraced the royal bloodline." Elder Talia's voice echoed through the chamber. Rejecting Prince Dorvac of the Galaxies system was not merely a personal choice. It was a betrayal of your duties as heir to the Asterian throne. Alara lifted her chin. The ceremonial crown of platinum and stellarite gems felt heavy on her head, but she refused to show weakness. "I will not bind myself to someone who views our empire as a resource to be harvested," she replied, her voice steady despite the anger coiling inside her. "The alliance would benefit the Galaxy far more than our people." Elder Malon leaned forward, his aged face lined with frustration. "Your analysis, while perhaps accurate, is irrelevant. The marriage was arranged when you were born. 40 stellar cycles of diplomatic relations, nullified by your pride." "By my judgment," Alara corrected. A murmur rippled through the observing court. No one spoke to the council this way. "Then perhaps your judgment requires calibration," said Elder Talia, exchanging glances with her colleagues. "The council has reached its decision. As punishment for breaking the Galaxy Accord, you will be temporarily stripped of your royal privileges." Alara had expected this. House arrest, perhaps. Diplomatic isolation. What came next, however, she could never have anticipated. "You will be bound in service to a human," Elder Malon announced. The chamber erupted in gasps. Humans were a relatively new species to the Galactic Concordat, primitive by Asterian standards, barely 1,000 years into space travel. They were tolerated for their resources and unusual adaptability, but never considered equals. "This is outrageous." Alara's voice rose. "I am of the stellar bloodline, which makes this punishment fitting," Elder Talia said coldly. "For 1 stellar year, you will be bound to a human diplomat through the ancient ritual of Kylara, the shame bond. You will work alongside him, learn from him, and perhaps gain some humility in the process." "And if I refuse?" Alara challenged. "Then you renounce your claim to the throne. Permanently." The threat hung in the air like a suspended blade. Alara's fists clenched at her sides, her nails cutting into her palms. She had trained her entire life to lead her people, to guide the empire toward a more prosperous future. She would not surrender that duty. "I accept your punishment," she said finally, the words like acid on her tongue. 3 days later, Alara stood in the lesser audience chamber, dressed in the simplified royal garments of a princess under censure. The traditional glow fabric had been replaced with conventional materials, her crown taken away. She felt exposed, diminished. The doors slid open, and a human male entered, escorted by 2 royal guards. "Princess Alara," announced the steward, "your bondservant, Marcus Drake of Earth." Alara assessed him with a critical eye. He was tall for a human, with broad shoulders and a straight posture that suggested military training. His hair was dark, cropped short, and his eyes were an unusual shade of green that reminded her of the forests on Asteria's southern continent. His skin was tan, weathered by what she assumed was actual planetary sunlight rather than the filtered illumination of space habitats. "Princess," he said, bowing his head slightly. "It's an honor." His attempt at their formal language was passable, though his accent marked him clearly as an outsider. "Is it?" she replied coldly. "To be the instrument of my humiliation?" "I doubt that very much, Marcus Drake." If her hostility affected him, he didn't show it. "I understand this arrangement wasn't your choice." "It wasn't mine either." "Oh? Did they drag you from your primitive world against your will?" she asked sharply. A flicker of something amusement, perhaps, crossed his face. "I was already here as part of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. I was reassigned. Apparently, someone thought I was particularly suited to this role." "And why is that?" "I'm told I have a gift for patience in difficult situations." Alara narrowed her eyes, searching for mockery in his expression, but finding none. "You'll need more than patience, human. The bond we're about to undergo isn't merely symbolic. The Kylara creates a psychic connection. Your thoughts, your feelings, they'll bleed into mine, and mine into yours." She leaned closer, her voice lowering to a threatening whisper. "Every moment you spend in my presence will remind you of your inferiority." Marcus held her gaze, unflinching. "Then I suppose we'll both learn something, princess." The ceremonial attendants entered then, carrying the ancient artifacts needed for the bonding ritual. As they prepared, Elara glared at the human who would become her punishment. He met her gaze steadily, neither submissive nor challenging. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. Perhaps this human wouldn't be as easy to break as she had hoped. 2 weeks into their bond, Elara still couldn't believe her humiliation. The psychic link of the Kylara ritual had taken hold, creating a constant awareness of Marcus's presence, like a shadow at the edge of her consciousness. What was worse, she couldn't detect the expected primitive thoughts from him. Instead, his mind held a disciplined calm that irritated her further. Today they were scheduled to attend a trade negotiation with the Vexory delegation, a species known for their cunning and aggressive bargaining tactics. Under normal circumstances, Elara would have led such discussions. Now, she was relegated to observer status, with Marcus officially representing Asterian interests as her advisor. "You understand the Vexory will attempt to exploit this situation," she said as they walked the crystalline corridor to the meeting chamber. "They'll see me diminished and assume our position is weakened." Marcus nodded, adjusting the formal Asterian diplomatic attire that had been tailored for his human frame. "I've studied their cultural patterns. They respect power, but they also value unpredictability. Perhaps we can use their perception of this situation to our advantage." Elara stopped, facing him. "And how would we do that, human?" "By letting them underestimate us." A slight smile played at the corner of his mouth. "By letting them underestimate me." She studied him for a moment. "You're more calculating than you appear. Military tactics and diplomacy aren't so different, princess. Sometimes the greatest advantage comes from being overlooked." The negotiation chamber doors slid open, revealing the Vexory delegation already seated. Their scaled forms gleamed under the ambient lighting, sharp eyes tracking the entrance of Elara and Marcus. Ambassador Zex, the lead negotiator, rose to greet them, his forked tongue flicking briefly in what Elara recognized as a gesture of amusement. "Princess Elara," Zex said, bowing with exaggerated formality. "We heard of your situation. How gracious of the council to allow you to observe these proceedings despite your censure." Elara felt heat rise to her face but maintained her composure. "The interests of Asteria remain my priority, Ambassador." Zex's eyes shifted to Marcus. "And this is the human they've bound you to? Fascinating choice." He addressed Marcus directly. "I hope you're prepared, Earthborn. Asterian trade negotiations are complex even for those with developed minds." Marcus bowed, a perfect execution of Vexory custom, not too deep, maintaining eye contact. "I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn from such experienced negotiators," he replied in flawless Vexory dialect. Elara couldn't hide her surprise. The language was notoriously difficult, with tonal variations that most non-Vexory couldn't distinguish, let alone reproduce. The ambassador's scales rippled, a sign of surprise. "You speak our tongue." "Poorly, I'm sure," Marcus responded with careful modesty. "But I believe understanding comes before agreement." The negotiations began, and Elara watched as Marcus employed an unexpected strategy. Rather than asserting Asterian dominance as she would have done, he asked questions. Simple ones at first, then increasingly specific, drawing out the Vexory's terms while revealing little of their own position. When the trade representatives began pressing for Asterian concessions on stellar mineral rights, Marcus seemed to hesitate, glancing at Elara as if uncertain. She felt a subtle nudge through their bond, not words, but intention. He was playing a role, she realized, creating an impression of vulnerability. "Perhaps," Marcus suggested, "we could take a brief recess? I need to consult with the princess on these technical matters." Once they were alone in the antechamber, Elara turned to him. "What are you doing?" "They're pushing for access to the Catherian belt. Those mineral deposits are crucial to our defense systems." "I know," Marcus said, his earlier hesitation completely gone. "But they're not actually interested in the Catherian belt. They want the lunar mining rights to Asteria's third moon." "How could you possibly know that?" Their negotiator kept returning to shipping routes that pass near that moon, and their economic minister has been receiving transmissions from their geological survey fleet. "I saw the data on his tablet when he thought I was struggling to understand their proposal." Elara stared at him. "You were watching their tablets while simultaneously conducting negotiations in their native language." Marcus shrugged. "Multitasking is a human specialty." When they returned to the chamber, Elara watched in fascination as Marcus steered the conversation toward the topic of lunar mining rights. When he casually offered limited access to Asteria's third moon in exchange for Vexory medical technology, The flash of triumph in Ambassador Zex's eyes confirmed his theory. By the end of the day, they had secured a trade agreement far more favorable than Alara had anticipated. The Vexory believed they had outmaneuvered the human, never realizing they'd been guided precisely where Marcus intended. As they exited the chamber, Alara found herself reassessing the man beside her. That was unexpectedly competent, she admitted. High praise, he replied with a hint of amusement. Don't get accustomed to it, she said sharply. One successful negotiation doesn't erase what this bond represents. His expression sobered. I understand what I represent to you, princess. A punishment. A symbol of your fall from grace. He held her gaze. But that doesn't mean I can also be useful. That night, alone in her chambers, Alara found herself replaying the day's events. Through their bond, she sensed Marcus in his assigned quarters, not his thoughts, but his presence, steady and calm. She had expected to despise this connection, this invasion of her private consciousness. She hadn't expected to find it reassuring. The realization disturbed her enough that she almost missed the subtle alert from her security system. Someone was accessing restricted files in the palace database, files concerning her father, the Emperor, and his upcoming diplomatic journey to the outer systems. Alara hesitated only briefly before sending a message through their bond, a deliberate push rather than the unconscious awareness they normally shared. Marcus, I need you. The immediacy of his response surprised her. I'm coming. Perhaps, she thought as she waited, this alliance wasn't entirely unwelcome after all. The council meeting had dragged on for hours, with Alara forced to sit silently as the elders debated resource allocation for the outer colonies. As a princess under censure, she had lost her voting privileges but was still required to attend, another aspect of her punishment designed to remind her of what she had lost. Marcus sat beside her, taking notes on a data tablet. Though he had no official voice in these proceedings either, the council had grudgingly allowed him to attend as her bonded companion. Over the past month, his presence had become less grating and more something else she couldn't quite define. The agricultural development on Nebus 4 cannot sustain itself without additional water reclamation systems, Elder Talia was saying. The cost is prohibitive. Alara bit her tongue. She had studied the Nebus system extensively and knew the council was overlooking a simpler solution. Under normal circumstances, she would have spoken up. She felt a gentle nudge through their bond, Marcus, sensing her frustration. He glanced at her, a question in his eyes. She hesitated, then subtly nodded. If I may, Marcus spoke up, his voice respectful but firm. Princess Alara has conducted extensive research on similar colonies. Perhaps her insights would be valuable in this discussion. The council chamber fell silent. No one had expected the human to speak, much less advocate for Alara. Elder Malon frowned. The princess's status does not permit her to address the council directly. Of course, Marcus replied smoothly. But as her bond companion, I'm permitted to relay information she provides to me. And her analysis of the Nebus situation is quite compelling. A subtle loophole in the censure protocols. Alara sent a pulse of surprised gratitude through their bond. Proceed, Elder Talia said after a moment, curiosity overcoming her usual sternness. Marcus outlined Alara's solution, using the natural satellite orbits for gravitational assistance and water delivery, reducing energy costs by nearly 60%. He presented her ideas with perfect clarity, never once claiming them as his own. By the meeting's end, the council had adopted a modified version of Alara's proposal. As they left the chamber, she found herself walking closer to Marcus than usual. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to do that. It was the right solution, he replied. Denying it because of politics would have been foolish. The council doesn't always prioritize wisdom over tradition. Then perhaps that's why they found you threatening enough to punish. His green eyes met hers. You see beyond their limitations. Alara felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest and through their bond. She quickly suppressed it, alarmed by her own reaction. I need to return to my chambers, she said abruptly. There's a ceremonial reading I must prepare for tomorrow. Marcus nodded, but she felt his concern through their connection. The passage of stellar alignment? It's an important tradition, isn't it? She paused, surprised by his knowledge. You've studied our customs. I've been trying to understand. He hesitated. Would you explain the significance? The texts I've found are rather abstract. Under normal circumstances, Alara would have dismissed such a request. Asterian spiritual practices weren't for outsiders. But something curiosity, perhaps, made her reconsider. Come, she said. The palace gardens would be more suitable for such a discussion than the corridor. The garden's bioluminescent plants cast a soft blue glow over the crystalline paths as they walked. Alara found herself explaining not just the ceremony, but the philosophy behind it. The Asterian belief in cosmic interconnectedness, how the alignment of their three suns symbolized moments of perfect clarity. It reminds me of something, Marcus said thoughtfully. An Earth philosopher named Jung spoke of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to transcend typical cause and effect. Your species philosophizes about such things? Alara asked, genuinely curious. Marcus smiled. We've been contemplating our place in the universe since before we could write. Some things are universal, I suppose. They sat on a bench beneath a canopy of luminous vines. For the first time, Alara found herself truly looking at him, not as a human, not as her punishment, but simply as Marcus. His features in the blue-tinted light seemed less alien than they once had. Why did you become a diplomat? She asked suddenly. He seemed surprised by the question. I was a pilot first, actually. Military. His expression grew distant. I saw enough conflict to know I wanted to prevent it rather than participate in it. And you believe diplomacy can prevent war? Not always, he admitted. But understanding usually precedes peace. It's worth trying. Through their bond, she sensed the honesty in his words, and something deeper, a pain associated with his military service that he kept carefully contained. You've lost people, she said softly, the realization coming partly from their connection and partly from the look in his eyes. Yes. He didn't elaborate, but she felt the echo of grief through their bond. Without thinking, Alara reached out, her slender fingers briefly touching his hand. The contact sent a spark through their psychic connection, intensifying their awareness of each other. She felt a surprise, followed by something warmer that made her pulse quicken. She withdrew her hand quickly, unsettled by her own gesture. It's getting late. As they walked back toward the palace, their bond hummed with unspoken thoughts. Alara found herself torn between the instinct to reinforce her emotional walls and a new, unfamiliar desire to lower them. That night, in her dreams, she saw stars aligning, three suns moving into perfect harmony. Between them, a bridge formed, connecting worlds that had always been separate. She woke with the lingering sensation of Marcus's consciousness, no longer a shadow at the edge of her mind, but a warm presence she had somehow, without realizing it, begun to welcome. The thought both terrified and exhilarated her. What had begun as punishment was becoming something else entirely, something without precedent in Asterian tradition. Something dangerous. The grand hall of celestial harmony glittered with the light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers. Asterian nobility from across the empire had gathered for the emperor's jubilee, celebrating 5 decades of his rule. Despite her censured status, Alara was required to attend. A princess of the blood could not be absent from such a significant event. She stood near one of the towering windows, watching the 3 moons of Asteria rise in sequence above the capital city. The ceremonial attire she'd been permitted felt stiff and plain compared to her usual royal garments, another reminder of her punishment. You still outshine everyone here, came Marcus's voice from beside her. She turned to find him in formal Asterian diplomatic attire, midnight blue with silver accents, tailored perfectly to his human form. Through their bond, she sensed his genuine admiration, unmixed with the calculation or ulterior motives she'd grown accustomed to detecting in courtiers. Flattery, Marcus, she replied, though without the sharpness that would have colored such a response 2 months ago. Observation, he corrected with a slight smile. Though I admit I'm not entirely objective these days. The admission sent a flutter through her chest that she knew he could feel through their connection. Their bond had deepened over the past weeks, evolving from an unwanted intrusion to something she found herself relying on, his steady presence, his unique perspective, his unwavering support. The council members have been watching us all evening, she noted, changing the subject. Elder Dalia seems particularly displeased. Marcus glanced discreetly toward the group of elders. They expected our bond to be a lesson in humility for you. I don't think they anticipated. He paused. That we would work well together? Alara suggested. That, and perhaps other developments they hadn't foreseen. The warmth in his eyes made her heart race. Their growing closeness had become impossible to ignore, emotionally and physically. Just yesterday, during a private strategy session in her study, their hands had touched over a star chart, and the contact had sent such a powerful surge through their bond that they'd both frozen, staring at each other in startled recognition of what was building between them. A servant approached, bowing. Princess Alara, the Emperor requests your presence for the ceremonial toast. She nodded, moving toward the central dais where her father stood resplendent in his formal regalia. Marcus followed at a respectful distance, as protocol demanded. Through their bond, she felt his heightened alertness, something that had become familiar whenever they entered crowded situations. His protective instincts, she'd learned, ran deep. The Emperor acknowledged her with a formal nod as she took her place among the royal family. From this vantage point, she could see the entire assembly, hundreds of Astrian nobles, along with diplomatic representatives from allied systems. Her gaze caught on Ambassador Zex from the Vexory delegation, his scaled features impassive, but his eyes following her with unusual intensity. The Emperor raised the ceremonial chalice. To 5 decades of peace and prosperity for the Astrian Empire, he intoned. May the cosmic alignment continue to favor our path forward. As the assembly echoed the toast, Alara felt a sudden spike of alarm through her bond with Marcus. His concern struck her like a physical blow, focusing her attention instantly on where he stood at the edge of the dais. His eyes were scanning the upper gallery with laser intensity. Something's wrong, his thought came clearly through their connection. She followed his gaze to see a hooded figure moving along the upper balcony, something metallic glinting in their hand. Before she could react, Marcus was already in motion, pushing through the crowd toward her. The events that followed seemed to happen in slow motion. The hooded figure raised what Alara now recognized as a dart gun, a weapon that could bypass the palace's energy shields. The Emperor, engaged in conversation with Elder Talia, remained oblivious to the threat. But the weapon wasn't aimed at her father. It was pointed directly at her. Marcus reached her just as the assassin fired. With inhuman speed, a reminder of Earth's higher gravity that had given him enhanced reflexes on Asteria, he pulled her aside and placed himself in the dart's path. It struck him in the shoulder, the impact sending him stumbling against her. Guards swarmed the upper gallery as chaos erupted in the hall. Alara caught Marcus as he fell, lowering him to the floor. His face had already gone pale, veins of unnatural blue spreading rapidly from the wound. Toxin, he managed to say, his voice strained. Fast acting. Medical team. Now, Alara shouted, pressing her hand to the wound. Through their bond, she could feel the poison burning through his system, the pain he was fighting to control. Why? She demanded, cradling his head. Why would you do that? Through the haze of pain, his eyes met hers with perfect clarity. You know why. And she did. Their bond laid bare what words hadn't yet expressed, his devotion, his care, his love. Emotions that mirrored her own, though she'd fought against acknowledging them. The royal medical team arrived, whisking Marcus away to the palace infirmary. As they stabilized him and administered counteragents to the poison, Alara refused to leave his side, even when the Emperor himself requested her presence in the emergency council session that followed. My place is here, she told the royal messenger, her voice leaving no room for argument. Hours later, with Marcus finally stabilized but still unconscious, Elder Talia entered the infirmary. Her usually stern face was grave. The assassin has been captured, she informed Alara. A Galaxy operative, from the very royal house you refused to marry into. Alara's hands tightened around Marcus's. They targeted me for rejecting their prince. It appears more complicated than that, Talia said carefully. The assassin claims they were hired by someone within the Astrian court. We're investigating, but the court is full of those who might benefit from my removal, Alara finished. The political implications were staggering. If someone in the Astrian hierarchy had conspired with the Galaxy. She looked down at Marcus's unconscious form, at the human who had taken a toxin meant for her. Through their bond, though muted by his unconscious state, she could still feel his life force, weakened but fighting. He will recover? Talia asked, with what seemed like genuine concern. The doctors believe so. Human physiology processes toxins differently than ours. It's actually working in his favor. The elder studied her for a long moment. Your bond with him has become more than the council intended. It wasn't a question, but Alara answered anyway. Yes. That was never meant to happen. Alara met the elder's gaze steadily. Many things that were never meant to happen turn out to be exactly what was needed. As if responding to her words, Marcus's hand tightened slightly around hers. Through their bond, she felt him stirring toward consciousness, his awareness reaching for hers like a beacon in darkness. And in that moment, surrounded by political intrigue and the aftermath of violence, Alara made a decision that would change everything for herself, for Marcus, and for the future of the Astrian Empire. 3 days after the assassination attempt, Marcus finally regained full consciousness. Alara was there, as she had been every moment since he'd taken the poisoned dart meant for her. The royal physicians had been amazed by his recovery. The toxin would have killed an Astarian within minutes. Yet his human physiology had somehow fought it off. "You should be resting," were his first words to her, his voice hoarse but his eyes clear as they found hers. Alara couldn't help but laugh, a sound of both relief and exasperation. "You nearly die saving my life, and your first concern is whether I'm getting enough sleep?" His lips curved into a weak smile. Old habits. Through their bond, she felt his relief at seeing her unharmed, his joy at her presence beside him. The emotions flowed between them with an intensity that would have frightened her once. Now she welcomed them. The assassin was Galaxy, she told him, her fingers entwined with his. But they were working with someone in the Astarian court. Marcus nodded slightly, unsurprised. "I suspected as much. The timing was too convenient, the first major event where your protection detail would be minimized due to your censured status. The investigation is ongoing, but the council is being suspiciously cautious. I think they fear how high the conspiracy might reach." A knock at the door interrupted them. Elder Talia entered, followed by Elder Malon. Both wore formal robes of state, suggesting an official purpose to their visit. "Princess Alara." Talia greeted her with a formal bow. "We are pleased to see your bond companion recovering." "Marcus," Alara corrected firmly. "His name is Marcus Drake." The elders exchanged glances. "Indeed," Malon acknowledged. "His actions at the Jubilee have not gone unnoticed. The council has been in session regarding your situation." Alara straightened, her hand still holding Marcus's. "My situation?" "In light of recent events," Talia explained, "the council has reconsidered your censure. The humans, Marcus's, intervention saved not only your life but potentially prevented a major diplomatic incident. This service to the Empire cannot be overlooked." Malon stepped forward. "Therefore, the council has voted to annul the Kylara bond and restore your royal privileges and title. You will once again have your full voice in court, and—" He paused significantly. "Discussions with the Moradian system regarding a potential marriage alliance have already begun." Alara felt Marcus's hand tighten slightly in hers, a small movement accompanied by a wave of emotion through their bond. Resignation tinged with sorrow, but no surprise. He had always understood this was temporary. "And Marcus?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "What becomes of him?" "He will be honored, of course," Talia said. "Given diplomatic recognition and a formal position as an advisor to the Earth Embassy here on Asteria. A generous arrangement." "Generous," Alara repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. Through their bond, she felt Marcus's gentle reassurance. "It's what we expected, Alara. Your position, your people, they need you." She turned to look at him, really look at him. The human who had started as her punishment and become so much more. Who had seen her not as the crown princess of Asteria but simply as herself. Who had taken a poisoned dart meant for her without hesitation. In that moment, with perfect clarity, she understood what she truly wanted. What she needed. "No," she said, turning back to the elders. Talia blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "I said no. I declined the council's offer." The elders stared at her in disbelief. "Princess Alara," Malon began, his tone suggesting she'd misunderstood. "This is a formal reinstatement. Your period of censure will be officially expunged from the records." "I understand perfectly what you're offering," Alara replied, rising to her feet. "The restoration of my position, my privileges, my place in the succession. All I have to do is sever my bond with Marcus and agree to another political marriage, this time to the Moradians instead of the Galaxy. It is your duty," Talia said firmly. "The same duty you rejected before." "And I reject it again." Alara's voice rang clear and confident. "But this time, I offer an alternative." Through their bond, she felt Marcus's surprise, followed by a wave of warmth as he began to understand her intention. "What possible alternative could there be to fulfilling your royal obligation?" Malon demanded. "A new kind of alliance," Alara said. "One based on genuine partnership rather than political convenience." She took a deep breath. "I will maintain my bond with Marcus Drake, not as punishment, but by choice. And together, we will represent a formal alliance between Asteria and Earth." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Marcus, despite their bond, seemed stunned by the boldness of her proposal. "Impossible," Talia finally sputtered. "A permanent bond with a human?" It's unprecedented. So is Earth's rapid advancement into galactic politics, Alara countered. They've accomplished in centuries what took other species millennia. Their adaptability, their perspective, these are assets we've consistently undervalued. And you believe this? Personal attachment justifies reshaping imperial policy? Malon asked incredulously. I believe my attachment to Marcus has shown me truths the Council has ignored for too long. Alara squared her shoulders, including the corruption that has taken root in our own court. She revealed what she and Marcus had discovered during their forced collaboration, evidence of Council members taking bribes from the galaxies, of information being leaked to rival systems, of resources being diverted from outer colonies. This is why someone wanted me removed, she concluded. Not because I rejected a marriage alliance, but because I was getting too close to exposing the truth. The elders' faces had gone pale. What she was suggesting amounted to treason by some of the highest officials in the Empire. These are serious accusations, Talia said carefully. With evidence to support them, Alara replied. Evidence I'm prepared to present to my father directly. It was her strongest card. The Emperor still held ultimate authority, and his love for his daughter remained undiminished despite her censure. Marcus had managed to sit up in his bed, his presence through their bond steady and supportive. What Princess Alara proposes isn't just a personal choice, he added. It's a strategic one. Earth seeks meaningful alliances in this sector. A formal bond between our worlds, symbolized by our continued Kylara, would benefit both our peoples. The political implications were clear and potentially revolutionary. Not a subjugation of a lesser species as the Kylara had been intended, but a genuine partnership between equals. The Council will never approve, Malon said, though with less certainty than before. Then I will take it directly to the Emperor, Alara replied. Along with what we've discovered about the corruption within the Council. It was both a threat and a promise, one the elders clearly understood they couldn't counter. We will convey your decision to the full Council, Talia said stiffly. But be warned, Princess. The path you're choosing has never been walked before. After they departed, Marcus reached for Alara's hand. Are you certain about this? He asked, his eyes searching hers. You would be giving up so much. No, she said softly, sitting beside him on the bed. I would be gaining what matters most. Through their bond, she let him feel the full depth of her feelings, no barriers, no hesitation. He drew her closer, one hand gently cupping her face. I never thought. He began. Nor did I, she admitted. It seems the Council's punishment had consequences they never anticipated. Their lips met in a kiss that seemed to intensify their bond 100-fold, thoughts and emotions flowing between them in perfect harmony. What had begun as forced proximity had transformed into something neither of them had expected to find, something real and precious and powerful. When they finally parted, Marcus smiled. So, a princess and her human bond companion against an entire imperial court? Alara laughed, truly laughed, joy radiating through their connection. They never stood a chance. In the days that followed, as Marcus regained his strength and they presented their case to the Emperor himself, Alara reflected on the irony of her situation. The Council had meant to humble her with their punishment, to break her pride by binding her to a being they considered inferior. Instead, they had given her the greatest gift imaginable, a partner who saw her clearly, who challenged her when needed and supported her always, whose strength complemented her own. You know, Marcus said one evening as they stood on her balcony, watching Asteria's 3 moons rise in perfect alignment, a rare celestial event considered highly auspicious in Astrian culture. On Earth, we have a saying, every cloud has a silver lining. Meaning? Alara asked, though she could sense his meaning through their bond. That sometimes, what begins as misfortune can lead to unexpected blessings. She turned to him, her silver-flecked eyes meeting his green ones. Then perhaps we should thank the Council for their punishment after all. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. I think we just did. As their lips met beneath the 3 aligned moons, their bond humming with shared emotion, Alara knew with absolute certainty that what had begun as her punishment had become her salvation, and that whatever challenges lay ahead, from the Council, from rival systems, from the complexities of forging an unprecedented alliance, they would face them together. Not as princess and subject, not as superior and inferior, but as equals, as partners, as one.